Good evening. Oh, that was lame. Good evening. Good. So welcome to the fifth Stockholm Game Developer Meetup. So the first thing I would like to say is that people are asking why are we here and what is happening. And we talked about that 1 year ago. How many was here exactly 1 year ago? Oh, that's few. So how many is actually here for the first time? Oh, that's brilliant. That's really good. So the first then is, so why are we here? So the thing is, there's a conference going on here right now, a developer conference. It's a 3-day conference. It's about like 2,000 people in the house. We have had 6 parallel sessions. And since we are already renting the house, we are like using this for community meetups in the evening. So we have had like the Stockholm JS has been here a number of times, the AI group, there's a jug meeting over there. And since last year, we're also inviting and starting up this Stockholm game developer meetup thing. So that's good. And my name is Mattias Karlsson. And okay, we do that again at the end then. And you're?
I'm Jen.
Oh, sorry, continue.
I don't know, you
Jen,
said your name. So
Yeah.
Jen is good.
And I'm Alexander.
Yeah. And normally it's like me and Jen that is running that, but since we have so much stuff going on now, Alexander has promised us to help us host this tonight. So you have to support him. It's the first time for him as well. Yeah. So we will do 2 presentations, and then I can do so this is me. Rakiv is not here today because it's birthday, and I think that was just the wrong prioritization, right? He should be here on his birthday, but I don't know. It was something with his girlfriend, or yeah, I don't know. And then Jen. What's else? Okay, so wrong order for this. But basically, we have 2 presentations today with Ryan and Bona, and I'm a little bit sorry because I'm tired because I've been awake since like 6 a.m. this morning. But so why we're here? And after the presentations, you are all welcome to join the bar. So basically, you have 2 options when we are done here. You can either just, find another bar, go home and sleep, or you can join the bar here. And apparently, it's important to know if it's an open bar or not. It's not. So it's a nice bar. It's a lot of people. There is a pool table. There are flipper machines, and there is a bar. But you have to pay your own beer. Sorry about that. Too many people here, I guess. So, what did I miss?
The next meeting.
And the bar is at the 5th floor. Or just follow me.
Yeah. So how to get to the bar is you go out, take the escalator all the way up to 5, turn right, go all the way to the end. There you, yeah, or follow Alexander. Or Hind. Hind is also back there. If you can stand up, you. Yeah. So this was a little bit messy, a little bit chaotic, but as expected, I would say. You can already now mark the date in the calendar for the next meetup. We already have a date and a venue for that. So that will be the 5th of March at AWS. AWS Games will host that. So that will be fun.
We will publish the speaker and everything soon.
And just, reach out, email us, whatever, and we will try to. And I mean, the most important part for this to be able to continue, we need 2 things. We need speakers, and we need somewhere to be. So if you're working in a game studio that is nice, that you want to show off to other people, try to get us to be invited there. So we have been to Avalanche and...
Been to Game Town.
Yeah. So we have been, so... Yeah, please add. Yeah, great work, But still, we will need more venues. So still go back home, ask for beer and room and speakers. Great then. That was all for me, I think. And then we should welcome Ryan. Thank
Hello, maybe? Oh, a microphone. What do you know? Wow, this is going great. Okay. 2 minutes to talk among yourselves while I get the presentation up on the screen. I will get your attention again very shortly, but it's not rude to carry on talking right now. So go ahead.
So it's actually on, do you have a tab?
Yep, I'm going to see if I can update the display settings so that I can get a separate view. Yeah, but I want to do this. There's a version of this which is this like split, doubling? Is that what that is? Hopefully. Yeah, great. That's what I'm looking for. Great. Okay. It's fine. I think it's all, yeah. Attention stuff. Woo! Yeah, all right, that works. Okay, cool. So I'm going to let you in a little secret. I'm super introverted and I hate public speaking. So if I freak out, you're just going to be like, you're doing great. Okay? Right, cool. All right, so when I left school, I felt like I was finally unleashed into the world, right? I felt like I had done the education thing and I was finally going to get out there and build some amazing products. It was like finally the shackles of education had been ripped from me. We were a group of friends. We saw problems and opportunities absolutely everywhere that we went. It was like a wealth of the world at our feet. We were even pretty good. We knew the basics of designs. We knew how to write passable code, and we even read a marketing book once, half a marketing book once. And we thought, this is going to be easy. So we had no real plan, 100 ideas, and a nearly empty bank account, and we ended up working our absolute asses off. Day in, day out, we failed 1,000 times, and we would eventually stumble upon our first kind of major successful product. It was a thing called Medibase. It was actually bought by quite a big company last week. And it was terrible. Every day was absolutely awful. I hated every second of it. I would look back and I'd talk about how successful it was and how we were all in it together and there's a huge sense of camaraderie. There was certainly some of that. But I begrudged every single thing that we had done over that year. I had lost the friendships that I had created. The stresses were too much, and I was ready to stop immediately as soon as we had lifted off. So I did what any young, incredibly naive individual with exactly one success and no knowledge under their belt does, which is go and help other people. So I started trying to consult with other startups. I had a modicum of success and I thought, okay, I'll see if I can help other people. Terrible decision on retrospect. I was an idiot, but this is part of the fun story that we get to. So I went and I helped them. There were some really great ideas out there. There are so many people with so many great ideas out there. And I thought to myself, this is crazy. Like there's products out here that are going to be used by millions of people that never get off the ground, but I'm going to do what I can to help. And inevitably, no matter how smart I was in that situation, or how dumb I was, and how smart the people I was working with, it all ended up in the same place, which is everything came down to a coin toss. It was an undeniable failure. Nothing ever shipped. Nothing ever made it in front of users or players. Or the opposite, somewhat better version where the product got out the door and the people who built it hated it. So I was pretty down at this point. I had worked with a bunch of different startups to try and make something happen. And I decided that I'm not the problem. It's the industry that's the problem. That's what I decided. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and move on from the startup world into something more survivable. So it didn't take long. I ended up entrenched in some huge dinosaur organization that promised to help you ship products. All you needed to do was buy their incredibly expensive course, and we would walk you through the 5 steps to shipping your product. It was going to be a work of art. Don't worry, you're going to be fine. And people paid that huge sum of money because time and time again, it worked. You ended up shipping your beige product out of your beige company to unenthusiastic users who begrudgingly used it because it technically did the job. But it was consistent. Everything always ended up shipping on time, sometimes even under budget. It was kind of wild. But it never created products that people loved. And I wanted to create things people loved. I'm speaking to a bunch of people who make games, and I'm hoping you want to make things people love as well. I came from a product background, but it didn't make me any less enthusiastic about wanting to put things in people's hands that they desperately loved on a day-to-day basis. I can name incredibly boring things that I love using. There's an alternative to Jira you should all use. It's called Linear. But there are products out there that people love, and they do ship eventually. And I wanted to be part of that, and I wanted to help people, given that I'd now seen both sides of this ecosystem that I was working with. So, I kind of dedicated myself to finding the bridge between these two warring factions, right? Like, can you be this chaotic, creative space where we come up with new and exciting ideas no one's ever heard of before? How do we build those in a way that is eminently sustainable and doesn't wear us out, doesn't end up exhausted? These two don't need to fight against each other. Startups look at massive organizations and say that they're ripe for disruption, and massive organizations look at startups and say these are a bunch of children who don't know the meaning of the world. Since that time, I have spent 14, 15 years migrating through the kind of startup scale-up space. In that time, I've seen these companies build and been part of building companies who have raised just over $500 million for products that ended up in the hands of people. Products I'm super happy to have been part of creating, and teams that I'm super proud to look back on and be part of. So I ended up here, speaking to you, in the hope that I might be able to tell you some of the things that I've learned along the way, and allow you to ask questions to someone who's done the 1,000 mistakes you can try and avoid doing by speaking to somebody. Okay, so let's get started. So we have these two sides, and we typically look at startups as being this chaotic space with Elmo hands and all kinds of stuff. And we look at these large organizations as meaningless factories of black and white. The truth is that whilst chaos is where innovation lives, and it's where these exciting ideas emerge from, it's very rare that you get something new and exciting without chaos. Take Portal, Hades, Breath of the Wild. All of these came from horrendous, crazy experiences where they even had established IPs that they were trying to do something completely new with. But they had this problem that chaos is messy, it's super expensive, and especially if you're trying to start your own studio or trying to get investment, it's hard to trust, right? You can't go up to somebody and say, I've got a great idea. Yeah, so does everyone else. So chaos is great for generating ideas. But structure is how you take those ideas and you allow them to survive. Without a system to funnel this incredible explosive energy, chaotic ideas don't ship. Production teams end up turning into chaos. Nothing playable ever reaches the players, and it's a disaster. But overstructuring too soon can do the reverse. You could end up building exactly the same thing over and over again. I'm not going to name any companies just in case, because some of you might be here. But you probably recognize this, right? A fear of being creative, a fear of chaos. Someone raises their hand and say, how about we do this new thing, boss? We don't do new things here. We're going to do the same thing. It's safe. And in many cases it is. There's billion, trillion-dollar franchises out there. They make perfectly safe games. I don't want to make safe games. And to me, the best teams are not those who choose between the chaos of new IP, the chaos of this exciting startup world, or the structure of reliable outcomes. It's the people who learn to master the art of switching between the two. To anyone who does any design classes, this is going to end up looking kind of familiar, because I based a lot of this on something called the double diamond process. And it's not a perfect mapping to the design system, but it helps us think about things. So we can split our production pipeline into two phases. The first of those phases is rather unkindly called the problem space, right? Like it's like, oh no, what's the problem? It's not that. And even more interestingly, in the games industry, we get the super exciting thing of defining the problem, right? It's the only industry where you can walk in and have to invent the problem for the player to solve. Most industries you go into and they're already complaining about what their problem is. It makes that part a little bit easier. But here we get to make up our own problems. And when I say problem, it's like, you know, how do I create a farming game with Dark Souls combat? Or is a dating sim that stars various kinds of rock formations a good idea? So we have this crazy creative space, the problem space. And once we have a truly well-defined understanding of the problem space, we move then into the solution space. This is where we can then start to break away from that chaotic side. We have a definition of something beautiful that's formed in this kind of forge of chaos into a full solution. And we can break that huge bundle of chaotic energy into small packages, small shippable chunks that we can measure our way through until we end up shipping something out the door. Instead of this big unfathomable ball of energy, we end up with this pipeline of packageable products that we can end up shipping. You can break this down into smaller pieces. These become incredibly familiar to anyone who knows the double diamond process, which is discover, define, develop, and deliver. And these are each divergent and congruent experiences. We're going to start by looking at the discover section. So at the very beginning of the discovery phase, you have nothing. And that's the biggest potential your game will ever have. It's the moment where anything is possible. And don't forget that this is potential, right? The blank page can be terrifying, absolutely. It can be very, very difficult to understand what you can do, but bear in mind this is the only time you can do anything. You can take that chaos and throw anything against the wall. Don't think about games you've played before. Don't think about games that you're excited to buy. Don't think about technical limitations, feasibility, any of those things. Begin by taking unbridled, raw, creative chaos. And as a producer, that already terrifies me. So I'm going to go ahead and put up a thing that says, here's the things that we're going to have as outcomes to make me feel comfortable as a producer, because I don't like chaos, even though it's necessary. So there's a bunch of things that we're going to do in this stage. We're going to try and figure out what game we want to make, and that's going to involve a whole load of ideation. It's going to involve a bunch of pitching to each other, prototyping, market research. Just go out there and create. Create to your absolute heart's content. But bear in mind that already we're in that zone where companies can fail. Right? This is what I've described. Anyone can come up with ideas. So use this power very wisely. Use the power of the time box, right? Just as a producer, step away. Don't try and manage this. Don't try and over-suggest this. Don't end up in an agile methodology. Don't start planning things out. Just allow people the time it takes to allow this creative energy to flow. In here, you want to encourage as much rapid prototyping, iteration. Do some market research. Go and find out where there's holes. Just find some content and start writing it down. And this is the diverging experience. It's about generating as much volume as possible. It's the raw material that we can use to generate incredible experiences. On to the next square, define. So we've reached a level where all of our possible dreams are on a piece of paper, hopefully captured. And that's an important point of this, is to capture everything. Find out a way of capturing those most exciting ideas on paper. And next we have to figure out what is the game that we can actually build. So this is about converging, taking all of our ideas and filtering down to a stage where we can find out what's the core of this idea, what's the absolute middle, the center through which we can build this entire experience. There's still loads of room for chaos here, and we should embrace it, right? Like as we start to iterate on these ideas and bring them together, start to slice away and slice down to the main core, this is absolutely a time to still inject new ideas. How can we build on things? How can we continue to develop? Chaos is still welcome here. Not quite as welcome as during the discovery phase, but welcome nonetheless. And this, if you haven't already, is a great time to establish some pillars. Take a look at the ideas that you have and decide, is there something that we're trending towards? Are we looking at co-op games? Are we looking at cozy games? Are we looking at, you know, extremely challenging games? What kind of pillars do we want our games to form around, or our products to form around? And the really great thing about pillars is that we can use them to convert subjective ideas into some level of objective reality. Because every idea might be a good or a bad idea, but when you hold it up against a pillar and say, is this good for co-op play? Is this good for cozy play? Is this good for my kind of game? It becomes a closer, more scalable objective reality. And it makes it easier to discuss because you're in a room full of people who have strong feelings about their ideas. And the only way of comparing them is if we have an objective metric. So finding a way to compare them to those pillars is a great way of converting the subjective into the objective and begin to start looking at how we funnel that chaos into something more like a pipeline, into something more of an objective deliverable. So there's a bunch of stuff that you would do during that phase. I'm not going to worry too much about this section. I can share out these slides later just so that the people can read afterwards. So don't try and read everything on that screen. But ultimately, the outcomes is the important part. At the end of this, we should be in a place where we've converged together to a single point. And that single point should be the point where we have a really, really clear set of pillars, some guiding principles about what our game will be. We have a vertical slice at this point, ideally, right? We've taken everything that could have possibly been and we've created one representative experience that shows us we know what this game's going to be. And in an ideal world, we've even created some pipelines that help us generate some content. We've picked an engine. We understand exactly how we're going to deal with this content. Is it going to be meticulously crafted, or is it going to be some kind of a systems-driven approach to things? We should have a really clear idea about what we want. We've moved from chaos into a single unifying factor that says, here's what our chaos has resulted in. And this is the easiest time to begin starting to do pitching to publishers, right? Is you might need to do it earlier, and we can talk about that very soon. But at this point, you have a very clear idea about what it takes to build your game. You have a clear idea that you've reached a level of the end of the chaos, right? The chaos has happened. We now have something we truly believe in. And we can start moving into the next space, the problem space. For the define section, I should mention, because I'm a product manager and I get to say Scrum and everyone gets to groan and roll their eyes, is during this phase, Scrum is a great tool. It's abused and terribly misused and mismanaged by many, many people who try to implement it. But it's during this phase when we're trying to define things down to a point that we need to be able to reflect and learn. And Scrum is nothing if not a process for developing whilst also reflecting and learning on our process. We know we need to get to an end point at the end of this definition. We can't just simply hope that we get there. So we should measure our progress towards that point. Okay, we started with 100 ideas. How many are we down to now? Okay, we've got the core 20. We want to get down to one experience. How close are we to defining that? And I would suggest using a point-based system. Again, another groan and roll your eyes for anyone who's had bad experiences with product managers and point-based systems. Point-based systems are really useful because at this stage of planning, we have the least idea about what we're capable of, right? We have this infinite playing field with which to develop this product. And we have absolutely no idea how big a mission is, how long a conversation is, how long it takes us to get VO written. All of these things are virtually impossible for us right now. To put a number and say, yeah, it's going to take us about 6 days to make a mission, it's meaningless. So at this point, we use points. That wasn't intentional. But we try to use points to create a scale, a relative scale. Sure, we don't know how big a mission is. Let's put a stamp on it and say it's this big. Okay, well, it's probably going to take us, we can probably do 2 characters in the length of time we can do a mission. Just start working with those kind of scales. It's going to be wrong. But the nice thing about estimates is, statistically, a lot of them end up evening out. It's the reason why choirs sound really great, even though you pick one of them, they're not that good singers, I promise. Is that on average, people are in tune. The same thing is true with these estimates. Some people overestimate, some people underestimate. But if you get enough data, it all ends up being roughly right. I promise. No matter what you might have experienced before, I promise if you do this right, it works. Okay, so we move out of our chaos space into the solution space, which becomes, okay, we know what we need to build. We have a bunch of prototypes. We know it's fun, hopefully. If your vertical slice isn't fun, go back. But we should be in a place where we know what we're doing. Full-scale development should be pretty much underway. And now it's about establishing those pipelines. Build your factory, right? Don't be afraid of the factory. Find what you've got that's good in that chaos. And know that if you want this to end up in the hands of players, you have to build the factory. This is more true than ever, where people are expecting 600 to 1,000 hour experiences, hundreds of missions, massive open worlds. I come from Avalanche, we build open world games. So it's more important than ever now to find the way of creating that factory, unless you're creating small indie experiences, in which case you still spend 2 years and don't get to the end of it. So when we're in this stage, we want to make sure that we have a way of generating assets and code, create these pipelines, create these funnels. Again, another example here. The end of this process, we should end up with a full playable build, right? This is going to take the majority of your time. If we talk about the concept phase, or the first phase taking 5 to 10% of your effort, second phase being 20%, this is maybe half of your time at this stage. Building those factories and using those factories to generate content. And because I'm a producer and I get to talk about methodologies, this is a good time to switch over to milestones and Scrum, but move towards a time-based style. During the early phases, you have no idea how long it takes you to build something, but by the time you're halfway through, or even 25% of the way through your development phase, you should have a pretty good idea how long it's taking you to build something. And if you don't, you're doing something wrong. If the fact is that at this stage, there's still huge amounts of scope creep coming in and new items coming in, you didn't truly move from the define phase into the develop phase. And the most important part of all this is acknowledging where you are. Don't make the whole product and the whole experience chaos. You will lose. And it's better to ship something really good than it is to not ship something great. So, set up some milestones so that you know that you're heading in the right direction. Scrum won't get you there because you'll just continue to do sprints for the rest of time, which might be fine if you're building Path of Exile. But it's less fine if you're trying to ship something to a publisher. And know that this is when chaos needs to be limited. Every request that comes in from here on in that's new, that doesn't fit our original document, that truly subverts the expectation of the game, take it meaningfully and seriously. Tell people that we're in this phase. There is not supposed to be chaos in this phase, and the cost of introducing new items, the further through this timeline we go, goes up exponentially. And we might even lose the core of our game in the process. If we truly believed in our vertical slice, we shouldn't continue to add things unless we verifiably can say that it adds value to our build. And lastly, deliver, the fun bit that most people never get around to. We're in a place now where we've created a huge amount of content, possibly too much, hopefully too much, that would be great. And we have these pipelines all in place. Now it's the polishing phase, right? We're not going to excite you with this one. We want to go from we've got a huge amount of content to everything is now polished and ready to ship out the door. Excellent stuff, right? And during that, we might also then continue the same process through into kind of live service if you're doing a live service game, which is that you might want to just use Kanban to manage this. Ultimately, you have a known list of work to do at this stage, right? You're not introducing or generating new content, you're polishing, you're refining. And as you go into live service, it's going to be bugs that come in or whatever happens to be, or new stories, but they're very known packages of work at this stage, hopefully, if you've done everything right up until this moment. So Kanban lets us be rapid with our bug fixes, new content rollouts. It just lets us process it like a factory, the boring company that I said at the very beginning. But unlike the boring company at the very beginning, we spent enough time in the chaotic and creative space that what we're pushing out of our factory is excellent, beautiful content that people love to play. These 4 names are from the classic Double Diamond. You might know them a little bit more as this. So this might be how you take this reflexively onto some systems that already exist within your own organizations. Cool, so just go and build it and everyone will publish it, right? Like everyone's going to feel really great and you're going to get loads and loads of money. But Ryan, small problem. People who want to invest in your games and your products, they hate agile. Like, it's been a dirty word for a long time. It's been a dirty word among a lot of people. But it's difficult, right? Like, I want you to give me millions of dollars, and I give you a promise. Good luck. Right? You can try that. They also just hate chaos in general as well, right? It's risky. Chaos is scary. They also hate fire emojis, so I've stopped putting those in my presentations, as you can tell. And that's somewhat true, or at least people believe it's true, but it's not quite. It's close to the truth. People think that they hate those things, especially fire emojis, but mostly chaos and mostly agile. But that's because what they think they want is safety. But when you take things away for a moment and you say, what you don't really want is safety, what do we want? What is our object of desire other than a green rupee? And the fact is that you get a bunch of people to say what they want, and you get them all to stare at their object of desire, including Nosferatu on the side there. And you say, what is it that you want? And to an artist, they might say, I want to be able to express myself, or express my skill, or develop. To an investor, they'll say, I want a good return on my investment. And to a producer, they say they want to be left alone. They generally fall into one of these 5 categories. These are horrible words, but you'll get the idea. In general, what they're actually asking for at this point, or what they think they're asking for, is, I want wealth, right? I want money off the back of this, or I want pride in the work that I do. I want to learn. I want to be famous. I want power. Whatever it happens to be. This is what they see when they look at your product. They see these things and they say, how do I get this out of that? But the problem is, and this is where things go a little bit astray, is that this is a communication breakdown. They think they want wealth, and they think when you introduce chaos, you're gambling with their wealth. But what they're secretly all asking for is a good product, right? Because, and there's some small lies here. They're only small, because this can be broken in some occasions. But in general, you don't want to be famous for a bad product. You don't really feel proud over a bad product. You can make money off of a bad product, but for the purposes of this, hopefully not morally bankrupt group of individuals, you want to make money off of a good product. So learn how to communicate in these people's languages, right? You want to make money, right? And I sit here as an artist and I shake my fist, and as the starving artist, I look up at the large bank and say, you just want more money. Yes, but the way that I want more money is for you to create something that I can stand behind, that I believe is going to make me money. And even better still, if your product is good, then I'll be known as the group who invested in your good product. It looks good for me too. And to the artist who just desperately wants to show their absolute best work, as you're looking down and you're saying, we've got 3 weeks left until we ship, I don't need that rock any prettier. Remind them that what they need is a product that's in the hands of players, not one that's sitting in a shelf somewhere. They don't want the most beautiful artwork to be sitting on their local whilst the product doesn't ship. It's in the best interest of everyone to remember that a good product is everything that we're aiming for. And a good product, as we've kind of already discussed, it starts in chaos. It means that we want the chaos. It's this sequence, right? You don't want to sell the fact that we can guarantee you a pipeline that generates a product at the end. Hopefully you can do that. But as I mentioned, you don't want to be that same beige company who make middling profits all the time. You want to sell the process. You want to sell this process. You want to sell them the chaos and tell them why it's good for them, why they should invest in the chaos rather than in the beige and in the mundane. And when they're there, if you can sell them on that, the most important thing is to be open and communicative about the phase that you're in. Let them know you're in the chaos and that that's good. Because it's one thing to say to yourself and to your team, we're in a chaotic mode, but then you turn around to publisher X and say, don't worry, it's all going perfectly. Because what they should hear is, it's all going, it's chaos, you should see it, it's amazing. and get them excited. Show them things they've never seen before. And then tell them, clever producers in the room, and here's why it's all going to be okay. So at the end of all this, having listened to me and put too many GIFs on the screen, I will put less GIFs in the future. I also say GIFs, sorry. The best teams, the best games, and the best ideas, they come from those who learn to embrace the madness of creation and the discipline of execution and all the restrictions that come with that. And ultimately, that's got to be good for everyone. Thank you. It's fine. I think I've got like 7 minutes for questions. Hi, yeah. Which kind of demo? There are demos throughout the whole process. A polished demo. Okay. I mean, you're going to take a slice throughout that whole polishing process. So at some point, your vertical slice is something that you can share reasonably publicly, at least with kind of investors. But at any given time during that polish phase, or even slightly earlier during the development phase, you can choose to do kind of a beauty corner. It's about when is the right time for your tooling lining up with your ability to do a demo. So if you're going to go ahead and build something and it's going to cost you a huge amount to develop that demo, what's the return on investment? What's the purpose of the demo? Is it so that the team have a more clear vision of where we're going to help educate them? In which case early might be good, even if you haven't got the pipeline set up. Is it so that you can turn up to Gamescom and share that? In which case, probably leave that as late as reasonable and end up in a good marketing cycle. So it's going to be somewhere either in that polish phase if you're trying to get it in front of players, create a corner and say this is where we're going to start, expand your vertical slice, or slightly earlier if you want to get more team alignment. If you're finding that the teams are beginning to develop and slightly diverging too much, because this is the risk during the development phase, right, is you've done all the creative, chaotic stuff and you've got this game design document or game pillars. Now people kind of go and flurry away and create their pipelines. If they lose sight of the end product, it can be a great opportunity to bring everyone back together again to say, we're going to do a gameplay demo of a particular level of whatever it happens to be, is where I would go with that one. But you've got to think about what's the purpose of that demo and when's the right time to do that. That's always going to be the case. What's the return on investment? Cool. Hey, yeah. Yeah. Okay, right, so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can start, and then if you want to jump in afterwards. Okay, so the first question is, this looks super clean, you must be lying. You didn't say that, but you're right. And then kind of where does a GDD fit into it, a game design document fit into all this? So this is overly clean, and at any given moment, you might realize you've done the wrong thing, right? And I'm not going to lie here and say, oh, if you just follow the, I used to, the consulting side of things, if you just follow this, you're going to end up something great. Do question yourself at every single step along the way here, right? Like if you get to the end of your concepting phase and you realize that actually you've got a team, but they're super divergent in their interests, is this the right team to build this thing? Or you might get to the end of the kind of the initial converging phase and say, we can't make this game, right? Like we've got a great idea, but we don't have the skills in house. And at which point you get to make one of two choices. Do we start hiring in to get these people? Like we've got this great idea for a massively networked game, but we've got no network engineers. And ask yourself, are you ready to commit to it? And maybe the answer is no. And you just go back to the concept phase. The faster you can fail, the faster you can move on to the next idea. And failing teaches you a lot. And it teaches you a lot more than the way more expensive version of this, which is to continue down this process even when things are going wrong. Because you might end up at years down the line, millions of dollars down the drain, just because you were so determined to make a concept work that never was going to work. So learning that you've made that mistake early, not a mistake, learning to fail quickly and seeing failure as a good choice is kind of critical on making sure that you don't go too far down this path and make it too messy. It will be messy, and these lines that I've drawn in between these two different sections, they are blurry. The goal is to make them as narrow as possible, not to eliminate them. To eliminate them is too difficult. If you just say, okay, we're done with concept, that's probably the easiest one. We're done with scoping. We're gonna move on now. There are still opportunities that present themselves. As you start to build out missions, you realize, if only we had a grappling hook. If only we could do so much. Or is that all the Avalanche people laughing? Sorry. If only we had something that wasn't a grappling hook. But like we could end up in that place where, yeah, we see opportunities that are too rich to ignore. And we should still take those opportunities. Why chaos still is introduced right up until the full production phase. In terms of a game design document, maybe you'll hear very different opinions as you speak to people later on today, but I think a game design document, as it's traditionally known, kind of the big Bible of here's the game, is maybe an outdated concept. It might sound like a great idea until you end up playing it and you realize everything we knew about this game is wrong. Fortnite's a perfect example of this, right? Fortnite started, I'm sure you probably all know, and I'm going to tell you everything you've already heard. But Fortnite was originally like a tower defense game, right? You build a base, zombies come in waves, great. And then someone was like, hey, have you seen that PlayerUnknown Battleground thing? And they were like, oh, and then they went and built it. And now they're doing okay. So don't miss those opportunities because your game design document tells you that it's not in your design. A game design document is going to continue to establish itself as you build. So to me, and I'll share these slides afterwards, the outcomes are what becomes the game design document at the end of development, not at the start. At the start, you start very loose and you say, here's the things that we want from our game. Here's what we need in the studio. Maybe it's user research where you identify something in the market and say, we need a game that fulfills this criteria, no more. And then over time, your game design begins to develop. You begin to discover what your game is, and you create rules, and you use them to challenge the work that's being done and say, here's a new idea, here's a new mission. Does it fit in with the game design that we're developing over time? So I would say a game design document is always a living document and not something that you establish up front. Okay. There was the second half to your question, did you? Okay. Yeah. 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 Yeah, be super careful with scope creep. So this is why you should really acknowledge the space that you're in, is because if you work with creatives, which you should all do, or you are one yourself, there's this inevitable desire, there's the pull of the void of, wow, we could just do a bit more, it'd be even better. And this is where I would probably suggest looking at something like kind of a concentric build instead, where you start from the absolute core. So you build the most simple version of fun in your game. And at least then, no matter what happens, you have that core. And you want to create the smallest shippable product first. So create the thing which is the most center and the thing that you could throw out the door and people would play and it would be fun. And then add on a layer. Add on one extra thing if that's the stage that you want to go to, and continue to do that through the natural scope of the game. Because in the worst case scenario, if you do bloat the scope too much, which can happen, you still have some game that's worth playing because every stage is just building on that core, rather than accidentally making the mistake of creating a really deep vertical slice with no rest of the game, right? Or a piece that doesn't fit altogether. But protect the vision that you created, right? We went through the chaotic period and we created artifacts that tell us we believe this game that we've defined will be good. And whenever anything new comes in, know the risk that it brings, know the cost that it brings, and weigh that against the relative value. know that it's a cost. Know very consciously that you're making an expensive decision, and only back it if you truly believe that it makes a significant impact to your potential to succeed. Okay. I think I might be out of time. I'll do one last question if that's... yeah, I'll be around anyway for people to talk, so feel free to shout at me otherwise. But otherwise, thank you for being so accommodating.